Hello, and welcome back to Facetly, where we talk about all things women, but we're not just for women. My name is Amber, and I am so pleased and so thankful and grateful to have you here with me today. Today, I am staying on the perimenopause topic because I think it's important. I was recently diagnosed with ADHD. That was a shock to me. Now, I have a therapist, and I've been working with her for a few years now. It started with one thing, and then it just moved on to different things. And she's such a blessing. I love her so much. If you're watching, Jackie, thank you. You are changing my life. I'm serious. But so she was the one who first kind of pointed that out, that it might be an issue. And so I went through my Medicare, medical providers psychiatry office. And interestingly enough, that doctor, the psychiatrist, he said, you might have a little bit, but it could easily be something else. And one of the things that he talked to me about was the intake portion of it. So because I haven't worked with him, I had to basically go through this entire series of questions, and it was like the intake process, so he could ask me questions and figure out if there were certain things that might indicate an ADHD diagnosis. Now, I think one of the things that was very confusing to him was when he talked about my educational experience. As a child, I was really good in school. I had really good grades. I was put into the gifted and talented education. This is in elementary school, and in middle school, I still participated in some of the advanced courses and classes. Same with high school. But the thing that changed in middle school and high school, I don't know why, but for some reason, it just something had switched, something had changed. And so I just didn't feel like, I don't know, I just didn't really feel like doing the work as much as I did before. Okay, I'm just trying to pause it for a second. I've got other people living with me, and sometimes it can get distracting. So anyway, but yeah, I'm not really sure what happened, but it was, my middle school years and my high school years were not my best academic years at all. It felt more comfortable for me to just live inside my head. And so I told that to him. And even with that, he still didn't really feel like that was an appropriate diagnosis. One of the things that's really, really attached to the label or the diagnosis of ADHD is the hyperactivity part, that H in there. So this is what attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And so the H was what I did not have. I was not one of those people who couldn't sit still, who, was constantly fidgeting or, getting in trouble because I just always popped up out of my seat and could not, physically remain stable, stationary, or, focused in one little area physically. That was not me. That never was me. It's still not me. I twitch, I fidget, but I think that's a little something else. My hyperactivity, and what is true for a lot of women, it seems, girls and women, is up here. It's a mental hyperactivity where sometimes as a child, at least for me, I would formulate these big, like, dream experiences where I'm living in this dreamlike world, participating in this dreamlike world for days, weeks at a time. That's just where I felt most comfortable. And I would focus in on that little imaginary world was what was giving me the dopamine, or the happy sensation that I needed. That felt easy to me. Schoolwork, it didn't give me the dopamine that I used to have. I didn't have the same dopamine, being like at the top of the class or the teacher's favorite or any of that anymore, which is why personally I think the I guess the grades and the satisfaction that I was getting from my grades and my academic performance in elementary school had shifted. And so, lost my train of thought. Essentially, I struggled. I did struggle a lot more in middle school and in high school, I think, especially high school. Once I had graduated high school, I started my academic career. I went straight to community college. I didn't have the grades to get a good scholarship or anything like that. So I went to community college, and with that, it was almost like, okay, I feel motivated again. I'm a college girl. I'm going to do all this stuff. I'm going to transfer to this college or that college or whatever the case. And eventually I started getting more, I want to say more satisfaction and more, I guess, I don't know. I can't think of the word. This is one of those brain fog moments. It's blocking me. Satisfaction. Well, either way, I felt a lot more secure about myself physically. So confidence, that was the word I was looking for. So I started to feel a little bit more confident, or actually a lot more confident. Um, and I was probably what you might call a late bloomer. So I didn't really have my first boyfriend of sorts until I was 19 years old. And then that kind of became my new way of getting dopamine. Not necessarily from boyfriends or whatever, because I still didn't have a lot of boyfriends growing up, but it was more from just, I guess, getting attention finally. I finally felt comfortable in my body, and even though I was still a chubby chick, I was still I was getting looks, and it was just like that was a first for me. It was really nice. So again, my grades started to take a slide, and the things that I wanted to focus on are things like, getting into a romantic relationship. I did want to get married. I'm not married. I've never been married. I'm 50 years old. But at that time, I wanted to be married. And so that became my new focus. So, anyway, all of that I'm saying that to say that I had just learned recently that people with ADHD can be good and hyper focused at things. But it's those things that bring them that sense of accomplishment that allow them to experience that dopamine rush that, keeps them motivated. And sometimes once that dopamine rush is hit, let's say it's at the end of a project, or if it's I also love music. But the task of learning music and not being able to learn it right away, that's, I like things that I can really feel good at and that I can accomplish without having to put a whole bunch of work into it. And I don't know if that's a normal thing for people with ADHD. I have no idea. But anyway, with the psychiatrist, like I was saying, I had learned that, for a lot of women and probably even for some men, but it seems more prevalent, relevant, prevalent in women, is this idea of needing to escape, live in our heads, or have a lot of hyperactivity going on in our brains. And that was the thing for me. And it still is the thing for me. Now, interestingly, I was not. Now, where this became important for me, and I think it started to stick out a lot more, was actually when I started working at the job that I had to leave. I don't know if you've seen that video. I'm going to see if I can link it somewhere, but I actually did have to quit my job. And I believe it was due to existing symptoms and issues that I already had, but they were amplified because of perimenopause. So that's a very vulnerable video for me. So, if you ever thought about quitting your job, or maybe you're working right now, maybe you have quit your job, I'd love it if you can watch that video. If I can tag it, I'll tag it up here. If not, I will definitely put it at the end. But anyway, when I started the new job, I was 40. So I was already experiencing perimenopause symptoms. I didn't know I was experiencing perimenopause symptoms. And also, I had not yet been diagnosed with ADHD. So when I started that job, I had already finished my degrees. I have a master's degree. And so I had met the requirements to take on this role. And although it was an internship role, it was a very, very fast paced environment. And the only thing I was thinking to myself, and I was kind of hyped up by my parents too, like, okay, you're smart, you can do this, you got this, it's not a problem. This is going to be a breeze for you. And so I went in there not really thinking that it was going to be a breeze, but I didn't think it was going to be as difficult as it was. It was it was mind blowing. And the problem was, I saw people around me who had been working in that job for, decades. And they treated the job like, oh, I got this done, this done, this done, this done, this done. And I kept thinking to myself, what's wrong with me to where I get stuck. I will finish a little piece of a project and I get stuck. Or I have to remind myself, hey, how do you do this again? And in that internship program, I actually had to rotate throughout different sections of the office and learn how to do these different types of contracts. And so it was just like, I don't even know how to describe it, but it felt like a, a hugely immersive experience into learning an entirely different culture, a different language. Like every single time I would go to a new section of the organization, and it shouldn't have felt like that, but it did. It did for me. So anyway, I think throughout the years, even though I graduated from the internship program and I was a highly valued employee from what I heard, from supervisors and different people that I had worked with in leadership, I always felt like I am not doing this job appropriately. I'm not doing it properly. I just don't know what I'm doing. It felt really overwhelming. And so, at least at this point in life, I didn't have time to sit there and, try to bury myself in an imaginary world of, oh, I'm just going to take myself to this imaginary island, go on vacation for a little bit. No, there was none of that. I didn't have time for that. But it was really mentally exhausting. And having to walk into the office every single day with this air of confidence, not really showing that, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm doing, not really showing that I want to break down and cry, a lot of times. And, you know, just really feeling overwhelmed because I'm being pushed with these projects and things like that. And here, you take care of this one. I want you to do this one. I want you to do this one. And in a way, it felt validating, but also it felt very, very uncomfortable. So, anyway, we get to 2024, and along with, some very, very, very severe symptoms that I was dealing with, very painful and very severe symptoms, I wound up leaving my job. But it was in 2025 when I was working with my therapist, and she just basically said, "Hey, I don't want you to feel any kind of way about this, and I'm just putting it out there. I don't know for sure, but I think you might have ADHD." And so, it never would have crossed my mind, honestly. But once she said it and I started looking into it and I started seeing how it presents in women a lot of times, it really felt like, oh my gosh, that might be it. And then after, doing a lot more research and stuff, because I've been doing research on perimenopause and looking into perimenopause, that's when I started making that connection that, okay, I think my ADHD has always been there, but because of the hormonal changes that I've had with perimenopause, it's starting to present a lot more. And I mean, it just, I do believe that that's really one of the things too that caused me to quit my job. Another thing that some people with ADHD will deal with, it's impulsivity. I've done some impulsive things over my life. I have. And quitting my job with all kinds of responsibilities and no backup plan is definitely an impulsive thing. Now, again, while I can say that I had good reason to, and I honestly didn't think that I was going to be unemployed for this long, that was very impulsive. That is not something that I recommend doing, and that's not something that anybody else would have thought that I would have done. I never would have thought I would have done that either, but I did. And so here we are. But it seems like this is kind of a rambling video. I'm not even quite sure how to end it at this point. But I will say this. If you are a woman in her midlife and maybe you have experienced things that don't quite seem, I don't want to say right, but just kind of seem like you think you process things a little bit differently, you look into some of these things. Look into ADHD. Look into how perimenopause affects the nervous system. How perimenopause affects our internal mental processing and things like that. I think you'll be quite surprised. And I do hope that these videos are helpful because they're really helpful for me sharing my story. And I do hope that I can get more people to, just feel a little bit more comfortable with the stage of life that they're in, whether it's, whether you're a young woman watching this or an older woman watching this. Um, just keep shining. Keep shining. My mom named me Amber, which means precious jewel. So jewels have facets and you have facets because you're a jewel. Sounds a little corny, but that's just the way I want to end this. So I love you. Thank you so much for joining with me today, and I look forward to the next video. Bye bye now.